and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. Today we begin with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
The Republic of Cote d'Ivoire held local elections on Saturday in what is projected to be a test of strength for opposition leaders ahead of next year's presidential election. Saturday's poll was the first election that former President Laurent Gbagbo's African People's Party had participated in since his return from exile in June 2021. Gbagbo was ousted during a brief civil war in 2010 and later acquitted of war crimes in The Hague.
De préserver le respect de l'état de droit.
Still on Saturday, Gabon's military rulers reopened the country's land, sea and air borders and imposed a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew. Here comes as military officers closed the country's borders after announcing they had overthrown President Ali Bongo on Wednesday, August the 30th. Meanwhile, the head of Gabon's junta, General Brice Oligui Nguema, met with local bankers in the capital, Libreville, on Sunday to discuss the country's economy a day ahead of his swearing in as transitional president. Hundreds of Nigerian protesters sang and danced as they extended a sit-in into its second night on Sunday at a French military base in Niamey. The sitting comes after a larger protest demanding the withdrawal of French troops as a result of popular military coup that Paris refuses to recognize. Anti-French sentiment has risen since the coup. It soared further last week when France ignored the junta's order for its ambassador to leave. However, the foreign minister of France has reiterated her country's commitment to maintaining troops in Niger and keeping the French ambassador in place. 7 victims of a 5-story apartment block fire in Johannesburg, including a 2-year-old, were laid to rest on Sunday in Oliphant-Fontaine Cemetery south of Pretoria. The fire, which killed more than 70 people on Thursday, has highlighted a housing crisis in the city as one of the world's most unequal and where poverty and unemployment are widespread. In the meantime, South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, urged authorities to enforce regulations preventing city residents from unlawfully occupying apartment blocks in the country.
Local government has to enforce the laws. I am told that with regard to that building, which is a city-owned building, which used to be an old government building, that's where 55 years ago or so I went to take my passbook. It's Albert Street. I still remembered it when I saw it. But the building is so old and parts of it is not safe. And the local government sought to take people out, but it was stopped by either a court process or by NGOs. Ministers and various people in government to get us to start looking. So there are laws that now need to be enforced, and we therefore need to deal with how those people who should not be living there are accommodated. Now, of course, a number of them do not even have permits to be in Johannesburg or in South Africa. So that's an added challenge that we have to deal with. But nonetheless, this has given us a wake-up call, and I have said that our cities and municipalities must now pay attention to how people live. We do encourage people to live in the inner city so that we densify the cities, but we need to do it in accordance with our laws.
The apartment block is owned by municipal authorities, but officials said it was invaded and hijacked by unknown groups. The building is linked to apartheid-era South Africa, as it was where black South Africans collected their dumpers or passbook, documents that would enable them to work in white-owned areas of the city.
Let's get to our main stories now. Gabon's coup leader, General Brice Nguema, has been sworn in as the president of the transitional government in the capital, Libreville. General Nguema led last Wednesday's coup against Ali Bongo, toppling the president shortly after he was named winner of a disputed presidential election. There are concerns that General Nguema's role will be a continuation of the 55-year Bongo dynasty, as is thought to be Ali Bongo's cousin. In his inaugural address, General Nguema defended the seizure of power last week, saying it was a patriotic act. He also said, in his words, there should be a referendum on a new constitution. There should be a new electoral law and a new penal code. There will be a free and transparent elections when the time comes. Gabon is the 6th francophone country to fall under military rule in the last 3 years as former colonial power France struggles to maintain its influence on the continent. Similarly, President Emerson Mnangagwa has also been sworn in for his second term at an inaugural ceremony in Harare, Zimbabwe. Taking his oath of office, the president promised to uphold the constitution after being sworn in by a chief judge, Luke Malaba, in front of tens of thousands of supporters from his ZANU-PF party. Regional leaders, including South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and Mozambique's leader Filipe Nyusi, attended the event. Even former First Lady Grace Mugabe was there. President Mnangagwa won the disputed August poll. However, the main opposition party says it will not seek to overturn the presidential election results in court. Africa's first summit on climate change has kicked off in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. African heads of state have gathered for the 3-day summit where they will discuss the continent's approach to climate change. This meeting is the first of its kind that aims to come up with a common plan to present to other world leaders at a COP28 United Nations Climate Summit later this year. Over the next 3 days, delegates at the summit are expected to consider a new funding model to help governments reduce carbon emissions. According to host Kenyan President William Ruto, Africa should be part of the solution to global warming rather than a victim.
And for a very long time, we have looked at this as a problem. It is time we flipped and looked at it from the other side. There are opportunities, immense opportunities as well. Before you guys went all over the place, we have ample renewable energy potential as well, and the natural assets and resources to green our own consumption, but also to meaningfully contribute to decarbonization of the global economy. We must see in green growth not just a climate imperative, but also a fountain of multi-billion-dollar economic opportunities that Africa and the world is primed to capitalize. And if you need any referencing, the UNEP is right here. The restoration and expansion of Africa's natural carbon sinks are not just an environmental imperative. In fact, they are an unparalleled economic goldmine. They have the potential to absorb millions of tons of CO2 annually, which should translate into billions of dollars if we were living in a fair world, improve livelihoods and millions of opportunities across this continent.
Let's take a closer look at this. The VOA's Africa correspondent in Nairobi, Mohammed Yusuf, joins us now. Hello, Mohammed.
Hello there.
So talk to us more about the aim of the summit, the first of its kind on the continent.
I think this year's theme, they're just looking at two things: clean energy, how Africa can explore that, and that is the area that is main of the focus. But also the focus is how Africa can finance some of the projects and how it can combat the climate change, how it can support programs where it tends to where you have the adaptation, mitigations, and resilience, and all these two areas now the conference is focusing on. But of course, if you look at other previous conferences, there are many other issues we discussed. But now for the 3 days conference, Monday, Tuesday, and which will end on Wednesday, is just two key areas, and how Africa can remain clean, have access to clean energy, and also how it can finance the general mitigation climate change programs in the continent.
And so within the next 3 days, the delegates are expected to consider a new funding model to help governments reduce carbon emissions. How would this be done?
Yeah, generally, many people have been talking about the 100 billion that pledge was made back in 2016, 2017, but that hasn't been coming, according to activists. Many people who are working in climate change areas, they've been saying that they have been receiving countries have been receiving about 10%. That's about 10 billion. But if you compare that, for example, with the global GDP, which is currently in the year 2023, is about $105 trillion. And that hasn't something that many African countries haven't been receiving. But now we understand that some of the experts, people we have been talking to for the past week, even today, we've been asking the same question: what is different now? And it appears what we heard generally is Africa is tending to use its natural resources, its people, ecosystem, everything there to go in there and try to solve its own problem and also the global climate problems. But that how will that be done? Of course, we know that there have been a lot of discussions on how Africa and natural resources is managed, how is exploited. And this is an area now Africa tends to approach in different way on how some of these resources can be useful to the communities, and how it can be protected, how new money can be found to protect these natural resources, the areas that is being mined, the communities. There is also a part that is being African leadership or people represented in this climate change are looking at. But of course, we know these are very emotive issues when it comes to African natural resource and how it's managed, how it's protected, who does what, who is taking it. But is Africa now having a different approach to that? I think we will know that on Wednesday when they'll have their final report. Of course, part of that report will be used for the COP28 in United Arab Emirates in the coming months.
And Kenyan President William Ruto Mohammed said that, Africa should be a part of the solution to global warming rather than a victim. And we know the continent has had its share of climate-induced disasters. What's the summit looking to do different from other climate change summits that have been held globally and that African leaders have been invited to attend?
It is more of a solution focus, but you can't wish away the problems the continent is facing. It produces gas emissions about 3 to 4% globally, but the most of the problems of this climate change is in Africa. And it appears more of a solution now. We also understand that many African countries, about 5 to 15% of its GDP is using on how to mitigate, how to fight this climate crisis. So it's something that you can't run away from. And this is some of the talks that is also going on the sidelines. This is not something we can wish away. Of course, we need to talk about solutions and how we can move forward instead of talking problems and not getting enough money for the past few years. But that solution, it has to come also people taking responsibilities. These are some of the things that many people, Africa generally, have been talking about. And many Western countries or developed countries have been really reluctant to talk about. Some of UNFCCC official, for example, who was there, he was talking the issue of development and how Africa should develop. And that development was warning Africa not to take the route that other continents or other developed countries have taken. But then the question is, Africa Africa is really on the urge, on the push to develop faster, to have a clean energy, to provide electricity, roads, infrastructure, clean water for its people. But the way some people have done, they want to follow that path. And some of these people are saying you can't take that path. If you take that path, it's going to be dangerous for ozone layer and dangerous for the world. But that's some of the debate, I think, that will be ongoing.
Well, Mohammed, thank you for your time and thank you for expanding that conversation for us.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. A quick check on the weather now, where at least 8 people have been killed by flooding in western Algeria. According to civil defense officials, torrential rains caused heavy floodwaters which swept all 8 victims. It adds that the victims had been traveling in a vehicle when a river they were passing burst its banks. However, the bodies of 2 women and 2 other men were recovered over the weekend in some of the affected areas. The United States Embassy in Uganda is warning that there's still threats of terrorist attacks in the country and throughout the region. This is coming after the Ugandan police earlier today evacuated a business center in the capital, Kampala, after suspicions that there were explosives inside the premises. It also thwarted a suicide bombing attack. The spokesperson of the Kampala Metropolitan Police, Patrick Onyango, says the police arrested a 28-year-old suspected suicide bomber who is helping the police to locate 3 other suspects believed to be part of a coordinated plot targeting churches across the country. The U.S. Embassy is also calling on its citizens in the country to stay alert and avoid large public gatherings. Well, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says an inquiry into a U.S. allegation that a Russian ship had picked up weapons in South Africa late last year pointed no evidence the vessel had transported weapons to Russia. This new development comes after U.S. Ambassador to South Africa, Ruben Brigitte, in May said that a Russian cargo ship, Lady R, had uploaded weapons at a naval base near Cape Town in December in a claim that sparked a diplomatic row. The U.S. accusations raised questions over South Africa's professed neutrality over Russia's war in Ukraine and concerns of possible Western sanctions.
From its investigation, the panel found no evidence that any cargo of weapons was loaded for export onto the ship Lady R. The panel found that there was no evidence to support the claim that the ship transported weapons from South Africa destined for Russia. When all matters are considered, none of the allegations made about the supply of weapons to Russia have been proven to be true, and none of the persons who made these allegations could provide any evidence to support the claims that had been leveled against our country. To reveal the details of the equipment that was ordered and offloaded would compromise important military operations and put our soldiers' lives at risk. Under these circumstances, when lives would be at risk due to the revelation of the type of equipment that is utilized by our armed forces, the need for confidentiality is both necessary and justified.
At least 138 people have been killed in renewed clashes in Ethiopia's Amara region. This latest figure was confirmed by the United Nations human rights spokesperson Marta Hurtado, who was updating journalists on the resumed violence between the Ethiopian military and the regional Fano militia.
In Amhara region, following a flare-up clashes between the Ethiopian military and the regional Fano militia, and the declaration of a state of emergency on 4th August, the situation worsened considerably. At least 183 people have been killed in clashes since July, according to the information gathered by our office. We have received reports that more than 1,000 people have been arrested across Ethiopia under this law. Many of those detained were reported to be young people of Amhara ethnic origin, suspected of being Fano supporters. We call on the authorities to stop mass arrests, ensure that any deprivation of liberty is judicially reviewed, and release those arbitrarily detained. Authorities must ensure that conditions of detention comply with international norms and standards. We also call on them to allow oversight bodies, including the UN Human Rights Office and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, regular and unconditional access to all places of detention. The safety of detainees needs to be guaranteed, and they must be afforded full protection of their human rights, including fair trial and procedural guarantees. We have also received allegations that at least 250 ethnic Tigrayans were detained in the disputed area of Western Tigray, reportedly in joint operations by the Amhara police, local authorities and local militia, including armed youth from Walgate. All human rights violations and abuses in the various regions of Ethiopia must be promptly, swiftly, impartially and effectively investigated, and those responsible must be held to account.
Residents of Kongolam, a border community under Daura local government area of Katsina State in Nigeria, voiced concerns about the impact of the border closure due to sanctions imposed on Niger Republic. Many have forsaken their farmland since they can no longer access them due to the sanctions. Our reporter Sadiq Ilyasu has more in this report.
5 states in Nigeria's northwest region border Niger Republic. Kongolam in Daura local government of Katsina State is one of the border communities in the region. Young people pass time with card games as economic activities have dwindled due to the sanctions imposed on Niger Republic. Since the announcement of the border closure after the military junta in Niger Republic, the impact is not only felt in Niger, as people here lament a decline in business activities. You can imagine here to be a market day. Balamuji Tafa, a farmer and a Nigerian, finds himself in a dilemma as his farm is located within Niger Republic, rendering it inaccessible due to the sanctions.
We have a farm that is within Niger Republic. It's now very difficult for me to go there. The government has deployed new faces in the border, so they don't know us. Even though the farm is due for cultivation, I have to leave it unattended.
The border closure is also impacting small businesses around the border community.
Yes, actually now our activities are very low, below average, to the extent that before I can transact, or I can do like 200 or 150 transactions per day. But due to this problem, sometimes to maintain 20 transactions is hardly per day. So things are down, totally down.
Honestly, it is nothing to write home about, because it has now crumbled to 0%. We are no longer doing anything here, honestly. We are seeking for, if there is any means the government can help us in terms of maybe palliative, or just to assist the people doing business in this area. There's these people doing business in the border area. They have to come to our aid, honestly.
In a land where borders mean more than lines on a map, these communities now bear the weight of the ECOWAS sanctions on Niger Republic. Sadiq Ilyasu, Channels Television News.
And finally, on the program, families escaping conflict in Sudan continue pouring into remote border areas in South Sudan, an area which lacks infrastructure and services, forcing many to live in difficult conditions, now worsened with the onset of the rainy season. This new emergency is straining an already stretched and underfunded response in a country that's still reeling from the devastation of a brutal 7-year civil war that ended in 2020. South Sudan hosts more than 300,000 refugees and asylum seekers, mainly from Sudan, in addition to the more than 2.2 million internally displaced people.
The main challenges that we are having here is overcrowding, because we are receiving on average about 1,200 individuals per day, and the onward movement is a bit slow compared to the number which is coming in. Actually, on average right now, we are just onward movement 350 individuals per day compared to 1,200. This brings already overcrowding. We also have challenges in health services. The health services we're providing here is basically primary health care. We expect to do referral to the Rank Hospital, which is the main hospital here, but Rank Hospital have a lot of challenges in terms of medical personnel, in terms of medicines, in fact, even infrastructure itself. Besides the health services, the food is another issue, which is also a challenge affecting our people. Right now, we are using cash instead of oatmeal, but it's for 7 days. This is also not adequate in case the numbers the rain, you find the whole place is muddy. Generally, this place, the terrain is not so good. The soil is too loose when it rains, so these are big challenges. But the one main one, which is very important, is that right now we are not able to transport refugees to Maban because the road is blocked. Now, UNHCR is working with partners to see how they can work on the roads so that we are able to transport. That means refugees will stay here longer.
That's Network Africa today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.